Have you ever found yourself completely obsessed with someone who treats you like an optional extra in their life, wondering why the people who hurt you the most are the ones you can't seem to stop thinking about? Why you keep chasing the avoidant who hurts you isn't about weakness, low self-esteem, or some character flaw that makes you attracted to pain. It's about how your brain responds to intermittent reinforcement and the addictive quality of uncertainty in relationships. When someone with avoidant attachment gives you just enough attention to keep you hoping while withholding enough to keep you hungry, they create one of the most powerful psychological traps known to human psychology. This pattern hijacks your brain's reward system in exactly the same way that gambling addictions work, making you crave the very person who causes you the most emotional pain. Understanding why this happens will help you recognize when you're caught in this cycle and give you the tools to break free from relationships that keep you constantly chasing someone who will never be emotionally available. The insights you'll discover today will explain why confident, successful people can find themselves desperately pursuing someone who barely acknowledges their existence, why the harder you try to win their love, the more they seem to pull away, and why leaving feels impossible even when you know the relationship is destroying your peace of mind. This knowledge isn't just about understanding relationship dynamics, it's about recognizing how your natural human psychology can be exploited by people who understand, consciously or unconsciously, how to keep you hooked on their inconsistent attention. The patterns revealed here will show you how intermittent reinforcement creates trauma bonds that feel like love but are actually addiction, and why the people who hurt you most become the ones you crave most intensely. Most importantly, you'll learn to distinguish between genuine love and the chemical high of chasing someone who keeps you constantly uncertain about where you stand. If you want to better understand someone's attachment style, see the link in the description to one of the most popular books on attachment theory. Picture a cold February evening in New York City, where Guinevere Beck from the Netflix series You sat in her apartment, staring at her phone and waiting for a text that might never come. She had been seeing someone for 3 months who had mastered the art of being just present enough to keep her interested, but absent enough to keep her constantly guessing. Their pattern had become depressingly predictable. He would disappear for days without explanation, then resurface with charming messages that made her heart race and her resolve crumble. What confused Beck most was that she had never been this person before, obsessing over someone's responses, analyzing every word choice, feeling physically sick when hours passed without communication. The relationship had started like a fairy tale. He was attentive, fascinating, and seemed genuinely interested in everything about her. Their first few dates felt like the beginning of something magical. Long conversations that lasted until dawn, shared interests that seemed too good to be true, and a connection that felt both instant and profound. But somewhere around the 3rd week, something shifted. His responses became shorter and less frequent. Plans would be made and then cancelled at the last minute. When Beck tried to address these changes, he would become distant and claim she was being too clingy or reading too much into things. What made this particularly devastating was the intermittent nature of his attention. Just when Beck would decide she was done with his inconsistency, he would send a message that reminded her of their early connection. He might share a song that made him think of her, reference an inside joke from their first date, or suggest plans for something special they could do together. These moments of warmth and attention would flood her system with relief and hope, making her forget all the pain and confusion of the previous days or weeks. The psychological trap was perfect in its simplicity. Beck never knew when the next dose of his attention would come, which made every interaction feel precious and significant. When he was warm and available, it felt like winning the lottery. When he was distant and unavailable, it felt like withdrawal from a drug she didn't even know she was taking. Her brain began to associate him with the intense relief that came when uncertainty was temporarily resolved, creating a cycle where the pain of his absence made the joy of his presence feel even more intense. The turning point came when Beck realized she was planning her entire life around the possibility of hearing from him. She would check her phone obsessively, cancel plans with friends in case he wanted to see her, and spend hours crafting the perfect responses to his messages to avoid saying anything that might trigger his withdrawal. She had become a shell of herself, completely focused on earning attention from someone who seemed to enjoy keeping her guessing about his feelings. The most insidious part was how he used her growing desperation against her. As Beck became more anxious about their connection, he became more critical of her neediness. "You're being really intense," he would say when she tried to discuss their relationship. "I thought you were different, but you're just like every other girl who gets clingy after a few dates." These comments would send Beck into a spiral of self-doubt, making her work even harder to prove she wasn't needy, while simultaneously becoming more desperate for his validation. The breakthrough came when Beck's friend Peach Salinger from the same show pointed out something that changed everything. "Beck, have you noticed that you never wonder if you like him anymore? You only wonder if he likes you?" This observation hit like lightning. Beck realized she had stopped evaluating whether this person was actually good for her and had become completely consumed with winning his approval. She was chasing someone not because they made her happy, but because they kept her in a constant state of uncertainty that her brain had learned to interpret as excitement. The revelation deepened when Beck started researching intermittent reinforcement and discovered that her responses were textbook examples of how humans become addicted to unpredictable rewards. Slot machines work on the same principle. The uncertainty of when the next payoff will come makes each pull of the lever feel potentially life-changing. Her relationship had become an emotional slot machine where his attention was the jackpot and his withdrawal was the mechanism that kept her pulling the lever. The final piece of understanding came when Beck realized that his avoidant behaviors weren't accidental or due to his own insecurities. They were strategic. He had learned, either consciously or unconsciously, that being inconsistently available made people more attached to him, not less. His hot and cold behavior wasn't a bug in his relationship system. It was a feature that kept partners constantly focused on earning his attention rather than evaluating whether he was worthy of theirs. The most shocking discovery was how this dynamic had changed her entire personality. The confident, independent woman who had entered this relationship had been replaced by someone who was anxious, desperate, and willing to accept crumbs of affection from someone who clearly didn't value her. She had become addicted not to him as a person, but to the chemical rush that came from occasionally receiving attention from someone who usually withheld it. Breaking free from the cycle of chasing someone who hurts you requires understanding that your responses aren't weakness or character flaws. They're predictable psychological reactions to intermittent reinforcement that any human would experience under the same circumstances. First, recognize that the intensity of your feelings for this person isn't necessarily about love or compatibility. It's often about the addictive quality of uncertainty. When someone gives you unpredictable attention, your brain releases dopamine not when you receive their attention, but in anticipation of possibly receiving it. This is why you find yourself obsessively checking your phone and feeling physically sick when they don't respond. You're experiencing withdrawal from a neurochemical reward system that their inconsistent behavior has created. Second, understand that avoidant partners who use intermittent reinforcement often do so because they've learned it's an effective way to keep people attached without having to offer genuine intimacy or commitment. Whether they're conscious of this pattern or not, they benefit from having partners who are constantly working to earn their attention rather than partners who expect consistent care and availability. Your desperation to win their love isn't about how wonderful they are. It's about how effectively they've trained your brain to crave their inconsistent validation. Third, start paying attention to how this relationship has changed your behavior and self-perception. If you find yourself constantly anxious, checking your phone obsessively, canceling plans to be available for someone who rarely makes concrete plans with you, or feeling like you need to prove you're worth loving, you're caught in an addiction cycle rather than experiencing healthy love. Genuine love feels peaceful and secure, not like a constant state of emergency where you're always trying to prevent someone from losing interest in you. Fourth, break the cycle by implementing what psychologists call extinction, completely removing the intermittent reinforcement by cutting off contact. This is often the only way to break free, because any contact, even negative contact, can restart the addiction cycle. Just like someone addicted to gambling has to stay away from casinos entirely, people addicted to inconsistent partners often have to implement complete distance to allow their brain chemistry to reset and their perspective to clear. Most importantly, begin to evaluate potential partners based on how they make you feel about yourself, rather than how intensely they make you feel about them. Healthy relationships enhance your sense of self-worth and make you feel more confident and secure. Relationships based on intermittent reinforcement make you feel anxious, desperate, and like you need to constantly prove your worth. The person who makes you feel crazy with desire might actually be making you literally crazy through psychological manipulation, while the person who makes you feel calm and valued might be offering the kind of love that actually nourishes your soul. Remember that the most intense feelings aren't always the healthiest feelings. The person who keeps you on an emotional roller coaster isn't necessarily your soulmate. They might just be someone who has learned to exploit your brain's reward system to keep you attached without having to offer genuine love and commitment in return. The cycle of chasing someone who hurts you represents one of the most common yet misunderstood relationship dynamics because it feels like love but operates like addiction. The intensity of your feelings tricks you into believing this person must be special or meant for you, when in reality, the intensity comes from the uncertainty and intermittent reinforcement they provide rather than from genuine compatibility or deep connection. Understanding this difference can save you years of chasing people who will never be capable of giving you the consistent love and care you deserve. The tragedy of these relationships is that they consume enormous amounts of your emotional energy and time while offering nothing in return except the occasional hit of validation that keeps you hooked. You become so focused on earning love from someone who withholds it that you forget what it feels like to be loved by someone who offers it freely. Your standards drop, your self-worth erodes, and your ability to recognize genuine care becomes compromised by your addiction to the high of occasionally receiving attention from someone who usually ignores you. Breaking free requires recognizing that this isn't about finding the right words to make them see your worth or the right strategy to make them commit. This is about acknowledging that you've become addicted to a person who uses inconsistency as a tool to keep you attached, and that the only path to freedom is completely removing yourself from their ability to continue the cycle. Your brain needs time to heal from the neurochemical addiction. Your perspective needs time to clear from the confusion, and your heart needs time to remember what healthy love actually feels like. You deserve relationships that feel like coming home, not like running a marathon where the finish line keeps moving. You deserve partners who are excited to hear from you, not people who make you feel grateful for basic human decency. You deserve love that enhances your life rather than consuming it, and partners who add to your happiness rather than controlling your access to it. The path forward involves learning to recognize the difference between love and addiction, between genuine connection and manufactured intensity. It requires developing the courage to walk away from relationships that feel exciting but leave you empty, and the patience to wait for connections that feel peaceful but leave you fulfilled. Most importantly, it means remembering that you don't need to earn love from the right person. They'll offer it freely because they recognize your worth. It's not weakness, it's a cycle. Discover it in the next video, the invisible cycle of hope, rejection, and confusion.